Hi everyone, my name is Tim Kington and this is Java for Beginners. This series of videos is aimed at people who want to learn Java and don't have any prior programming experience. We're going to work our way through the Java language and we're going to be using Visual Studio Code to do that. I thought a little bit about whether we should use an IDE for this, an integrated development environment like Visual Studio Code. The downside of using an IDE is that it's a very powerful tool. There are a lot of menu items and buttons around that we're not going to be needing. But the pros outweigh the cons, I think. VS Code is going to make it easier to compile our code, run it. When we start writing unit tests, it will be easier to do that inside of a tool like VS Code. It will display the results of our tests and let us keep track of which ones are passing and which ones are failing. And in general, I think it's going to make this easier. In this video, we're going to set Visual Studio Code up. We'll get the Java extensions installed, and then we'll take a look at how to create a Java project and run our first Java program. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is get Visual Studio Code installed. If you go to this page, you'll see a bunch of information about the Java extensions for Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, then you can use one of these coding packs to install VS Code and all of the Java extensions and the JDK, the Java Development Kit. If you already have VS Code installed, then you can install the extension pack for Java, and that will just add the Java-related pieces that you may not have already. Once you have VS Code installed, you're going to see a screen that looks something like this. Yours will probably be a little bit different. You will most likely see some kind of a welcome page or maybe a walkthrough that's going to show you how to use the Java tools inside VS Code. I'm going to do this in a way that will work no matter what you had installed, whether you freshly installed VS Code or you've had it around for a while and you just added the extensions. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is that IDEs are very powerful and they have a lot of menu options and toolbar buttons and things. So we're going to see a lot of things here that we're not going to get into right away. We're going to ignore the complexity and just kind of take the straightest path from here to a working Java application. To create our Java project, we're going to use the command palette. This is a very handy tool inside of VS Code. You don't need to remember where things are in the menus, and there are also a lot of things you can do that are not in the menus anywhere. If you hit Shift-Command-P or Shift-Control-P if you're on a PC, and then you start to type what you want to do, the command palette will find options that match. We want to create a Java project, so we're going to choose this option. And then we're going to use Maven to set up our Java project, so we'll select that. And then Maven has a bunch of archetypes that help us get started with a new project. We're going to just choose the Quick Start archetype. And then Maven's going to ask us a bunch of other questions. Maven is really an industrial strength Java build tool, and we don't need most of its features right now, so we're going to accept the defaults for pretty much every option. I'm going to select 1.4, and then com.example is fine as our group ID. We'll let the artifact ID be demo. And then it's going to ask us where we want to store our project. I have done this before, so I'm going to get rid of the old one and create a new folder for demo. And now Maven's going to go ahead and set up our project. So you'll see it running some scripts and things down here. Then it's going to start asking us more questions. Our version 1.0 snapshot is fine. Then it's going to summarize everything that we've said so far, and we will confirm that those are the correct options. Maven project created. So we can hit open over here to open our project up. Okay, once we've opened our project, we'll see a different view. So you'll notice that now on the left side here we have a bunch of different tabs. We're going to be dealing with the File Explorer tab right now. And in the Explorer tab we have a few different sections. So we have Open Editors, we have our project called Demo. Now this is a raw file view of our project. This will show every file that's in that folder. We're mostly not going to be using this view. We have another section down here, Java Projects, which is a Java-specific view of our project. So we're going to be using this almost all the time. If we expand demo here, you can see that Maven has set some things up for us. We have a source folder called source main Java. We have a source folder for our tests called source test Java, and it's attached a Java system library, and it has a folder here for Maven dependencies. So if we open up source main Java, we'll see the com.example package that we selected. Again, we're not worried about most of these details yet. We'll get into all of this in more detail later on. But we've created a class called app, and this is the program that has been created for us. So we have a little Java program that Maven has given us just to get us started. Let's take a look at what's in this file. The Maven has generated a bunch of code for us here, and we don't care about the details of this code yet. I'm going to be doing this a lot in this series of videos, asking you to ignore some things until we get into more detail later on. So in our app.java file that was created, we have a package definition. We'll ignore that for the moment. We have a comment. This is not code that will run, so we could put comments in here describing what our code does or how it works for other developers to read, or for us when we come back and look at this code in a few months and can't remember what we did. We have a class definition. Each file in Java is going to have a class in it. Ours is called app. And then we have our main method. For now, we're just going to say this exact string defines our main method, and the main method is where our program starts. So any Java application that we're going to be able to run standalone is going to have a main method in it. And when we run the program, the virtual machine is going to go to that main method and begin executing our code with the first line inside that main method. We have only one line in our program right now, system.out.println hello world, and this is what our program is going to do. It's going to print hello world on the screen. So we can run that program. If we hit F5 or go up through the menu, you'll see that Maven's going to do some things the first time we run it, get it set up, and then compile our code, and then it's going to print hello world in the console down here. So this output came from our code. When we run our program, VS Code and Maven are doing a bunch of things for us. This is really why we're using these tools and not just a text editor and a command line. Here you can see the process of creating a Java application. On the left side, we have some Java files. These are the source files where we write our code. In a typical application, we would have many of them. In our application, we only have one. Then we run a tool called the compiler, and it's going to turn those Java files into class files. Those contain what's called bytecode, which is a version of our Java program that the virtual machine can understand and can actually execute. Typically, we would then combine those class files into a jar file, which would contain our entire application. So that's really just a different extension for a zip file. That's really just an archive that contains all of the class files. And then we send that jar file to the Java virtual machine, which knows how to run our program. So all of this is happening behind the scenes for us. All we have to do is hit F5 to run our application, and VS Code and Maven are taking care of all of these steps. We can change this code and add a few more lines just to see that we can make changes and have them take effect. So if we add a couple more lines like this and we run it again, now we see 3 lines of output. I also like to add a line here at the beginning, just because of the way the output is working in this terminal window, to print a blank line. It'll be easier to see our output separate from all the garbage that Maven is producing. So now we get a blank line, and then we're going to get 3 lines of output. So what's going on here? Well, for now, we're not going to worry about the details of systemout.println except to say that it prints something on the screen. When we run our Java program, the virtual machine is going to go to the beginning of our main method, and then it's going to run the lines of code one at a time in order. So it's going to print a blank line, then it's going to print hello world, then it will print hello world 2 and hello world 3, and then we come to this brace which ends our main method. In Java, blocks of code are delimited by braces. So our main method begins where this brace is and ends where the matching closing brace is. You'll notice our class also has braces like this. So the app class begins here and it ends here. We will normally indent our code so that these braces line up and it's easy to see where they match. and where pieces of our code begin and end. But the compiler doesn't actually care about that. White space in a Java program, spaces and tabs and new lines, don't affect the way that the code runs. So we could mess up the indentation here, and our code could be very hard to read, but the compiler is going to do exactly the same thing it did before if we run it again. All right, so the arrangement of code and keeping things organized and nicely indented is really just for humans reading the code so that they can see how it works and easily figure out where, say, a method begins and ends, or which pieces of the code fit together conceptually. So we made a lot of progress here. Got Visual Studio Code installed, got the Java extensions working, created a Java project, and even managed to run some code. Daisy is exhausted. Next time we'll talk about variables, and we'll be able to read some input from the user and make our programs a little bit more interesting. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments section below what topics you'd like me to cover next.